Sounding like a broken record at this point, but the Duke defense sets the tone. They pick up another big non-conference win. Now we're back on to ACC play.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome on into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. So great to have you here with us today on Wednesday, December 18th, 2024. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. And today we focus on the men's basketball game last night that featured a 21-point victory for our Duke Blue Devils over George Mason. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Be sure to leave us a 5-star rating and written review, particularly there on the Apple Podcast platform. Really appreciate when you take the time to do that, and the algorithms really benefit from those 5-star written reviews that you leave for us there. Thank you for doing that. Also, you can watch the show each and every day on YouTube. A special shout out to our everydayers who are with us each and every day to be a part of the Locked On Blue Devils community. Like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our YouTube channel as we continue our climb towards 3,000 subscribers. All thanks to you guys. Certainly possible for doing that. All the everydayers know that I was a bit off in regards to last night's game. Certainly thought that Connelly would be the leading man for Duke. That wasn't necessarily the case, but nonetheless, Duke basketball picks up a win, allowing just 47 points in the non-conference, and they're 9-2 now on the season with their sights on Atlanta. They travel to Atlanta this Saturday to take on Georgia Tech. So joining us here on the program, as he does each and every week, our friend from Durham, it's Kevin Connelly, who's with us on the program today. And Kevin, we got to start there, man. You look at this box score here for a Duke basketball team, and what do you know? Another remarkable defensive effort.
Yeah, that's kind of the standard right now with this Duke team. And you kind of look at George Mason, and they're not that bad of a team. You look at their losses prior to coming into Duke last night to play the Blue Devils, and they fought Marquette really tough right to the end. I think it was similar, almost a 19 to 20 point margin was the final score in that game, but they were really right in it till about the 5-minute mark in that game. And then a pair of single point losses, one to Central Michigan and one in double overtime to East Carolina. So this is not a bad team. And kind of when you look at the conference of the Atlantic 10 that they're in, they've picked up a handful of really big wins. I think a lot of people are familiar with Dayton and what they did specifically out in the Maui Invitational. And then look at a team like St. Bonaventure now with Woj in the fold, kind of running their NIL and being their GM. And I'm pretty sure they're still undefeated. So A10 could be a quality mid-major conference this year. And George Mason proved that they have some guys that could hang tough and make things a little bit challenging for this Duke team. But this second half, they got rolling and they were really able to put it on them.
Well, like I told the everydayers on yesterday's show when Jordan Mann was here with us on the program, this George Mason team, like Duke, top 5 in the entire country in field goal percentage defense. So they really make it difficult on all teams, and we'll certainly speak to that on the offensive end of the floor here in particular. But the Duke defense standing tall once again, because it was a George Mason team that's been competitive in so many of their games throughout the year. They're less than 50 points on the night. They finished with 47. Malik Brown back. He had 16 minutes of action out there on the floor for Duke. That was certainly great to see. And another kind of big spark plug to set the tone defensively. That first 5 for Duke did a great job being locked in, building up the lead for the Blue Devils. They had a 9-point margin at halftime, and then we're able to build that there in the second half. Thanks to the tough, aggressive, the length of this Duke basketball team on the defensive end of the floor continues to pay off once again.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool that we all talked about this team and their defensive ability all offseason, and we've seen it come to fruition now here during the regular season. I mean, George Mason, they shoot under 30%. They shoot under 15% from three-point range. Kind of funny when you end up looking at the box score that Duke only made one more field goal than George Mason, but they still win by 21. So the three-point line and the free throw line were really the biggest difference in this game, and Duke did a great job at defending that three-point line, holding George Mason to just 2 of 17. And when we talk about their defense, it's really encouraging when they defend without fouling. It's a Duke team that only picked up 11 total fouls in the entire game, and George Mason only shot 6 free throws in turn because of that. So that's really the difference in this game. Even though Duke's offense didn't get rolling until the second half, their defense was there for the full 40 minutes, and that's why they were able to come away with a 21-point victory.
Are we becoming Virginia at this point, Kevin? I mean, when you look at what this Duke team's done, defense, every single game so far this season, it's been the offense in so many ways that's kind of been slow.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far yet, just because sometimes when you look at Virginia, at least recently, after they had their stretch run where they were national title contenders, they've just been so brutal offensively. And yes, they were brutal offensively when they went on to win a national championship, but they still had some offensive firepower from three-point range. So I wouldn't put Duke in that category just yet.
Well, it's Cooper Flagg that leads the way once again for this Duke team. He knocks down 2 3-pointers from the outside, had a couple of big highlight dunks, rebounding, sharing the basketball, just a little bit of everything. And it's a player that, look, we're only going to get to watch him play one season here in Durham, so might as well watch him each and enjoy the opportunities that we've got to watch him play for Duke. And I think the broader point here is, man, this guy's so tough. And we were talking about that throughout the entire recruiting period. You'd wonder in some of these games, like against a George Mason or an Incarnate Word or Wofford or some of these non-con games that Duke has had that aren't the brightest of stages and the brightest of lights, if he would be as engaged, and he certainly has every step of the way.
Yeah, he has a incredible competitive motor. And I think you're also seeing Cooper Flagg develop into a second half player. I don't have his splits right in front of me, but it seems very clear that his second halves are a whole lot better than his first halves. And that was kind of even on display against George Mason last night. In that first half, kind of a struggle, missed a lot of shots close at the rim, only had 7 points, was 2 of 11 from the floor. And he rebounded a lot of those misses because he had 5 offensive rebounds in that first half, and then kind of kicked it into a new gear once he got on the floor in the second half. 17 points, 5 of 9, and probably one of the most impressive things for him was that he didn't miss a free throw in the entire game. He went 8 for 8 from the line, so pretty impressed with his play, and he was the only Duke player in double figures in this game. So for how much of an offensive struggle it was specifically in the first half, they needed all of his points in that second half.
Hey, and some of that, again, let's give credit to George Mason. They were 3rd in the entire country. Duke was 5th. The Patriots were 3rd in the entire country in field goal percentage defense. It was a 10-game sample size at that point. It was against the likes of a Marquette and some teams that are quality basketball opponents so far this year. So in some ways, those stats spoke true. We were able to watch that unfold throughout that first half. Again, Duke finishes with just 25 points at the break, and every bucket felt like it was really difficult to come by for Duke.
No, it certainly was. And I think some people maybe would want to say, well, could there have been some rust because Duke didn't play in 7 days? I mean, I think that certainly could be attributed to it. I think,
yeah.
So what, the first almost 5 weeks of the season, they played close to 10, 11 games.
Yeah.
So I think you could attribute some of that to rust just for not playing for a whole week, and kind of coming off that high of the Louisville win, and then seeing an Incarnate Word and a George Mason on your schedule. Maybe you're not as thrilled showing up to the gym every single day to play those 2 games. But when it comes down to it, they got the job done. I think it's tough to really take a lot out of these bye games. And luckily for Duke, they don't have any more bye games on the schedule this year.
That's what we like to hear. We're ready to see Duke get back into ACC play. They take on Georgia Tech on Saturday in Atlanta. We'll dive a little bit further into the box score. Individually, we told you about Cooper Flagg, but who else stood tall and had a good night for the Duke Blue Devils? We'll find out when we return here in just a moment. Locked On Blue Devils today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. That's right. Get ready to tackle all the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just go ahead and visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. How about this Duke basketball team? They covered last night's game against George Mason. by that 21-point margin. And you could see the rest of the Duke schedule and odds over with our friends at FanDuel. Excited to get back into Thursday night football as well this week with our friends over at FanDuel. Tomorrow night should be a fun one in the AFC West between the Chargers and the Broncos. Again, $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Another sponsor on today's show is our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real sports money. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. All you've got to do is pick more or less on at least 2 different players for a shot to win 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. It's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. You could join right now because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Pickmas. That's absolutely incredible. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 off instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Once again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 off instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Prize Picks is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. All right, here we are. We're talking about the Duke basketball game and their win that they had last night against George Mason. For the Blue Devils, they win by a final score of 68-47. It was Cooper Flagg who led the way for the Blue Devils in the competition. He puts together another impressive 24-point performance to go along with those 9 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 block, 3 steals, only 3 turnovers. And he played 35 minutes. Duke was able to kind of hold back on his minutes that he played in that Incarnate Word game against a much tougher opponent here in George Mason. Cooper Flagg got some good run out there on the night. Pretty impressive, though, to see that whole line come together with what Flagg was able to do, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, he's an impressive player. He's the favorite still to be the #1 overall pick in this year's NBA draft. Obviously, he's going to get some pressure from the Rutgers star duo of Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, who continue to light it up in the Big Ten. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of those 3 battling to see if anyone can surpass Cooper Flagg for that presumptive #1 overall pick.
I want to give some love to the free throw line. That is something you and I talked about last week in terms of how worried should we be on the team shooting. How about the Blue Devils going 17 for 21? You mentioned Cooper Flagg doing his part there and going 8 for 8 from the stripe. Common Malawach scores 6 points. All 6 of them were at the free throw line where he went 6 for 8, only credited with 1 field goal attempt from the floor, but stepping up there from the free throw line. Give me something that you see, Kevin, or maybe give a comment there on the free throws, but what jumps out to you when you look at this box score?
Well, I will give a comment on the free throws. 21 free throws, 16 of them coming from Flagg and Malawach. And like I said, this team struggled to shoot free throws. They go 17-21, and that kind of was the difference in the game. I think the big thing when you look at the box score right now, and it's not necessarily a positive, it's that stat line for Caleb Foster. And I've kind of talked about it so far this season with Foster being on the bench, closing out some of these big games against Kentucky and Kansas and Arizona and Auburn and even Louisville to an extent. And that was kind of more the same here against George Mason. I mean, he goes scoreless. He does not play the final 10-23 of the second half. And people will say plus minus is an overrated stat. And sometimes I'll agree with them. I mean, even you look at here, and Malik Brown was a -7 in his 16 minutes, but Caleb Foster being a -12 in just 12 minutes against a team like George Mason when Duke wins by 21 points. And for those who might not know what plus minus means, that means Duke was outscored by 12 points in the 12 minutes that Caleb Foster was out there on the floor. I think this is not certainly the way anybody would have thought his sophomore year was going to start and begin, especially the way he performed as a freshman. You wonder if maybe he's still being held back by that ankle injury. I mean, now we're almost a year removed from him having that surgery, about 9 to 10 months now, I think. So yeah, I think that's something where Duke really has to get him figured out and see what's really wrong at the root of the problem, that he's not being an impact player on this team.
Well, and as a result of that, we see Sion James eclipse the 30-minute mark for Duke basketball. Haven't seen that happen so far this season. Obviously, Sion's a guy that in all the years he played for Tulane, he was used to having to play a lot of heavy minutes there for the Green Wave. This is an extended run for him. And again, he's just so steady when you watch Sion play. Not a whole lot that's going to wow you, so to speak, and his effort and what he does there. But yeah, just so steady of a basketball player.
No, he really isn't, and I think he brings a different development to this Duke team. I mean, you're starting to see the three-point shot come along. He brings a toughness, a veteran leadership. Now, he certainly hasn't played in a lot of big games at Tulane, but he has played a lot of college basketball, and he's not afraid of the moment. So if Caleb Foster isn't able to figure this out, I think Sion James, as we saw last night, is going to get a lot more minutes. And I think you also have to turn to a player like Isaiah Evans, who when he gets going, he's just about as good as anybody out there in the country. I mean, doesn't score in 7 first-half minutes and then gets 9 second-half minutes and hits three-pointers. So his shooting is going to be big for this team. I think he's shooting 50% in his limited three-point attempts so far this year. And Duke's going to continue to need that from him going forward, especially as we go back into ACC play now.
Yeah, without a doubt. Isaiah Evans was 17 of 34 coming into the game, so now he's 20 of 40 from three-point range. Tyrese Proctor started the season shooting 20 of 40 from three-point range this year. His percentage has fallen off just a tad, but again, another nice three-point shooting night for Proctor there, 2 of 3 from beyond the arc. I was going to go to Isaiah Evans next as well, so I'm glad you brought him up there, Kevin. Maybe there is, this is the sign, this is the signal. Let's get this guy some more run. Just 15 minutes, and he's able to just score by volume with those three-point shots. It feels like he's becoming more and more competitive on the defensive end of the floor. You know that the weight training continues for the Duke team throughout the course of the season, so he's going to continue to be working on his body. There's going to be some downtime here after the game on Saturday. It's a 10-day break for the Blue Devils before they play again on the 31st. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if a month from now we're looking at just a much heavier workload for Isaiah Evans, and he's contributing a whole lot more for the Duke team.
No, he is. And one thing I'll add to that is I'm surprised maybe at the usage of him. You look at the first half, he comes in 5 minutes into the game, plays about 4 minutes, then comes back in about 5 minutes later and logs about 2.5 minutes or so. Then we don't see him in the second half until he checks in with 9 minutes remaining. So nearly 11 minutes pass by in that second half with him not on the floor. And then he plays out those final 9 minutes and doesn't come off the floor until the final buzzer sounds. So,
and that's when he scored. He did not score at all in those first half minutes. It was the second half where he.
Yeah, so just a little surprised at the usage for Isaiah Evans that John Shire utilized last night, specifically just in that second half with sitting him for the opening 11 minutes and then letting him play those final 9 minutes. And then obviously the game gets a little bit out of hand as of late in that game when Duke pulls away. But kind of want to see him on the floor more often, specifically in that second half to start things. Duke, they started fast. Kind of funny enough how poor the offense played yesterday we're talking about, but they did start fast. They didn't dig themselves a double-digit first-half hole like they had in a couple of other big games. So you start fast. Isaiah Evans doesn't really have a lot to do to contribute to that, but he was on the floor, and then he's on the floor late when Duke pulls away. So would like to see him out there a little bit more.
All in all, good performance from the Blue Devils. They pick up the win 68-47. They're now finished with non-conference play until February when they get that one-game run with Illinois. So ACC play is due up next for Duke, and Georgia Tech set to be the opponent for the Blue Devils when they take on the Yellow Jackets there in Atlanta. We'll be back to talk about the ACC play and those Yellow Jackets here in just a moment. Locked On Blue Devils today is brought to you by the College Football Playoff. It's that time of year, and the College Football Playoff is back. And with the newly expanded 12-team playoff format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, the SMU Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then it's the Clemson Tigers looking to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max, the college football playoff, proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Okay, we're back here on the show with Kevin Connelly from Ball Durham. We're talking about Duke basketball getting set to get back into ACC play on Saturday against Georgia Tech. We already had one game against Louisville. Again, it's the weird portion of the schedule ever since the ACC expanded to 20 games, not the addition of these new teams within the league, but a couple of years back when they went from 18 conference games to 20 conference games. We have the one game in early December, and then you have a couple of more non-conference games, and we're back in competition the rest of the way here in the ACC for Duke, with Georgia Tech being the opponent coming up on Saturday in Atlanta. And if we go back to last year's game, that was one of Duke's ACC losses, and it was earlier in the slate for Duke basketball when they played Georgia Tech. I think this is a tough team that they'll be going up against here on Saturday, Kevin. But in some ways also, let's point out the fact that, look, the ACC has been really down to open up the year. We talked about the importance of some of those games last night for the league, where we had premier matchups with North Carolina getting a chance to take on Florida, Clemson getting an opportunity to play South Carolina, and both those teams lost. Tough look for the league right now.
No, it really is. I will disagree with you, JJ, when you said Georgia Tech's a tough team. I don't think they are a very tough team. Now, granted, last weekend they did go.
I'm trying to build up the intrigue here.
I know you are. I know you are. But I know last week they went to Chapel Hill, only lost by 3 to North Carolina. I think North Carolina has a lot of its own problems in its own right, as I do. I think a lot of the ACC. Just look at last night, Clemson going on the road against South Carolina. That's probably, you can make an argument, the second best team in the ACC going on the road against arguably the worst team in the SEC. Now, granted, it still was a road game, but South Carolina is able to win in overtime, and the SEC is off to a remarkable start this season, probably one of the best starts we've ever seen from a specific conference in non-conference play. So I think the ACC is in a lot of trouble right now because, JJ, I think no matter who you ask and who they're a fan of, they'll say Duke is by far the best team in the ACC.
Yeah.
You could make the argument probably for 3 or 4 other teams as the second best team in the ACC. I think you can make an argument for North Carolina. I think you can make an argument for Clemson. I think you can probably even make an argument for Pittsburgh. But other than that, I think this conference might have a really tough time getting 5 teams into the NCAA tournament. And obviously we don't know how things will shake out with other conference and bid stealers and so on and so forth. But I can see the ACC only getting 4 bids in right now. I don't know about you.
Which is crazy, man, that we're in this world where we're having to fight for more ACC teams to be in the NCAA tournament. And then we've had this discussion over the last few years. We're also having this conversation before any of these league games have been played, but there's not many opportunities for the perception of the league to change now that we're getting into conference play, right? That's why I kind of laid out the case for this week being the big week. North Carolina plays UCLA coming up on Saturday, another opportunity for the league to get a big win. We had those 2 games last night. Tonight, Memphis takes on Virginia, a chance for the Cavaliers to get a top 25 win out of the non-conference. But now that we're in conference play, it's going to be really difficult for people to be able to kind of change the perception of this league.
And that's a Memphis team that already went on the road and beat Clemson last Saturday.
Yeah.
So it's tough. And when you're looking at the ACC, I mean, things can change in terms of the net ranking and quad wins and whatever. But like Duke is the team that everybody's going to have to beat in order to bolster their NCAA tournament resume. Like North Carolina has to go out and beat Duke to try to get some quality wins for their NCAA tournament resume. Now, Clemson is lucky enough that they have a victory over Kentucky, which is going to serve them very well. Yes, it was at home, but that's still going to be a quad 1 win. And the other thing I think you also have to look at is you can't lose to these bottom teams in the ACC if you are a North Carolina or a Clemson or a Pittsburgh or a team that could find yourself on the bubble. You can't
Duke, we could be there too, when we're not on the bubble, so to speak. But let's talk about the Duke side as well, not to cut you off there, Kevin, but when Duke's trying to build their case for one of the top seeds, it's much easier to win this tournament the higher of a seed you are at the end of the year. that's where it gets tough when you can't really take those losses. And it feels as though every year there are a couple of that are just built into the schedule. Like there are just going to be a couple of nights that you don't have it in this league.
Yeah, but I think that's why it was so important that Duke beat Auburn, because you could make the case that Duke's win over Auburn right now could be the best win of anybody in the country.
Very fair.
Especially now a healthy Auburn team
Auburn's
after
a buzzsaw.
Broom got hurt last night in their game. So Duke has that victory over Auburn, which is going to serve them well, and that's going to bump them up probably to potentially get a 1 seed or a 2 seed. But yeah, I think that's the case. Like, you can't lose to Miami. You can't lose to Georgia Tech. You can't lose to Virginia Tech. You can't lose to Cal. Those are some of the teams that you have to avoid at being those disastrous losses for Duke, perhaps knocking you down a couple of seeds for the NCAA tournament, or for these other teams getting you in the NCAA tournament. You have to win those games.
All right, so Georgia Tech on Saturday, they're 4-6. The ESPN Basketball Index gives Duke a 91% chance to win this game over the Yellow Jackets. We'll see the line from our friends at FanDuel here in about a day or two. Georgia Tech has lost. They've got a glaring loss against North Florida in just their second game of the season. Against other power conference opponents, they lost to Georgia by 8. They lost by 20-plus against Cincinnati. We mentioned their close loss that they had against the North Carolina Tar Heels a few weeks ago, and then also have lost to Oklahoma and Northwestern. So not a whole lot of quality wins, actually none to really speak of for Georgia Tech so far this season with that 4-6 record. Yeah, I just want to build a little intrigue here, Kevin, but it's hard given this resume we're looking at. Yeah,
it's tough, and I think that's all right. Like, teams play like other conferences, or I should say most conferences, maybe the SEC doesn't. You're going to have these bottom teams in the league. Yeah. I don't think it's going to be any type of crazy road environment. I would imagine most of the Georgia Tech students have gone home for their semester and holiday break. Georgia Tech basketball doesn't have a rabid fan base that's going to make things intimidating for this Duke team. So for Duke, you want to go in, you want to throw the first punch, because the biggest thing you need to have happen in these conference road games when you're a superior team playing an inferior team, you can't let them hang around, because the more you let them hang around, the more they're going to start to believe that they can win the game. And who knows, a crazy 3 here and there, and it swings the momentum in the game. And now Georgia Tech is in front by 4 with 3 minutes to go, and you're really fighting an uphill battle. So for Duke, I think the emphasis should be starting fast, come out of the game healthy. Because if you remember last year when they went down to Georgia Tech, Tyrese Proctor sprained his ankle in the opening minute and was out for a couple of games. So start fast, stay healthy, and just keep this train moving, because after the game against Georgia Tech for Duke, they go on their holiday break. And they'll be out of action for about 10 days before Virginia Tech comes to Cameron. So finish this first quarter of the season strong would be my message for this Duke team.
Yeah, early start for Duke. A noon Eastern tip-off when they take on the Yellow Jackets there in Atlanta on Saturday. Kevin, always fun talking Duke basketball with you. Excited to see how this game plays out on Saturday between Duke and the Yellow Jackets. I know that you'll have a lot of coverage over there at Ball Durham. How can people support you?
So you can come read us every day at balldurham.com. We got everything you could possibly want over there on Duke basketball, from news and notes, game recaps, opinions, and a whole lot more. We're going to step into a broader scope here over the next couple of months and really dive into the ACC and where the league stands with a couple of pieces on that every single week. So again, that's balldurham.com. Come read us out over there every single day.
Good to see you, Kevin. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
Thanks, JJ.
All right, that's Kevin Connelly joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. That'll do it for our show here today. Thank you for your support, as always. Be sure to follow us on X at @LO_Blue Devils. Subscribe wherever it is that you get your podcast. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You guys are the absolute best. This show is what it is each and every day because of the support that we get from great everydayers like you. Really do appreciate that. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.